Hello and welcome back to Our Bookshop in Tring. I'm Ben Moorhouse. So we've got another author interview today. It's a children's book. Michael Holland is an ecologist and an educator, and he's written this book, I Ate Sunshine for Breakfast, a celebration of plants around the world, with illustrations by Philip Gordiano. I'll show you some of them. It's all about plants, essentially, with covering subjects such as evolution and pollination, with lots of lovely DIY tips for children to do as little projects. It was a lovely interview. I do hope you enjoy. Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me and us. I'm referring to everyone who's obviously watching it. So, and I very much like your background. That's obviously an image from your book, which we're going to talk about in a bit.
It is, yeah. It's a kind of a sort of simmered down version of the highly complicated plant evolutionary taxonomic tree.
I know. I'm desperately, as I've been reading through your book, I was desperately wishing I'd paid more attention in my biology class. There's the spread in the book, but excuse the post-it notes. This is an incredible book, but let's come on to this in a minute. Let's discover who Michael Holland is. You're obviously massively involved in the whole plant world, and you've got a passion that goes back to a child. So where did this all start? Where did your passion start?
Well, I think I was really lucky that I had parents who appreciated nature. They grew a lot of their own fruits and vegetables, on the verge of self-sufficiency, but not quite. I lived in a nice leafy part of North London next to woods and Hampstead Heath and so forth. And we were really lucky that back in the early 70s, they bought a cottage not far from where your bookshop is, in not far from Butler's Cross on Missenden Road, right next to Chequers Estate, right next to Coombe Hill that you're probably familiar with, just the other side of the hill. And I spent a lot of my childhood gallivanting in those woods and just being allowed to explore with my brother and sister. And, the only rule was we had to be back by 6 and make sure we had all the firewood we could carry for the fire, and it was brilliant. So that kind of freedom really helped.
So how old were you? So you came out to Butler's Cross, what, just for breaks, or did you?
Yeah, weekends and holiday. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Really,
yeah, no, I know that part of the world, and I mean, anybody from Tring knows Butler's Cross. I've climbed Coombe Hill many times,
yeah.
And how wonderful! What a wonderful.
And my very first memory, it was enough to put me off plants for life, because at the age of about 4, when they first bought the place, the garden was just a sea of nettles, stinging nettles, and I wandered into the garden and I couldn't see my mum because the nettles were taller than me, and everywhere I moved I was stung. I couldn't see above, I was totally lost and that's my first memory.
That's what nightmares are made of. Ouch! You seem a very rounded individual, given that hellhole you must have been in. That's terrible. So now, I did read somewhere that you received something. It was a book, a particular book, when you were about 7 or 8.
Yes, correct. Yeah, my parents bought me for my 8th birthday a book by Keith Mossman called The Pip Book, and it just sort of teaches you how to save apple pips or satsuma pips and dates and avocados and so forth, and just bring them to life, nurture them. The airing cupboard was never the same again, really. It was a sort of an experimental zone, and not always, and it didn't always work. And that's, I think, quite a good life lesson, that you try and something just turns into a moldy mess and stinks, but other things do grow, and if you want to try the other ones again, then do. And that's kind of a good life lesson. But yeah, that really switched me on to the everyday plants.
And then, so through your childhood, you went into teens. Did you you studied biology? You studied all the elements, I suspect, through into adulthood. Did you go to university and study something relevant?
Yeah, I mean, I did study. I was heading towards the sort of biological sciences and nature interest and zoology and all that sort of thing into A levels. And then I had this moment when we went on a field trip to a wonderful place in Wales called Dale Fort Field Centre, and it was about a session on ecology, which I'd never really grasped or heard about before. And it was some moment on the coast where we were looking at limpets, and I sort of saw this cause and effect. And from that moment on, I really wanted to study ecology. So I ended up going to Lancaster University and studying that, which is an incredible science because it's a mixture of planetary science and geology and hydrology and botany and zoology and chemistry and biochemistry. I mean, it's a foundation, very much a foundation. It's very holistic in its approach. So yeah, that was what I did at university.
Fantastic. And then I've seen your CV of places you've worked since then. It's very impressive. Was finding work straight after uni quite an easy thing to do?
I had a kind of bohemian 18 months where I wasn't rushing into kind of a career. I didn't actually know what to do. Didn't have any particular direction in terms of jobs relating to ecology. I went to a lot of gigs and I took a lot of photos of bands. I became slightly nocturnal, and it was great. It was the mid 90s, and then I got really lucky. A friend of mine said, she was working at Holland Park Ecology Centre in West London, and said that they were doing a voluntary. I think I got an extra tenner on my unemployment benefit and a travel card if I did 2 days voluntary work at this place. And I went along and I did it, and it really got me switched on to teaching environmental education. And up until that moment, the last thing I thought I'd ever do would be stand up in front of other people and talk, and especially children. Terrifying, really. And I had my first experience of teaching pond life and nature studies, basically, and that took me then to Chelsea Physic Garden, where I also volunteered for about 18 months, and then subsequently got a part-time job, and then later on a full-time job, and then eventually became head of education there for about 17 years.
Wonderful. And I referenced Kew as well. Is that one in the same place?
No. Kew's a much larger, slightly younger botanical garden, also in London. But no, I did work there on their teaching team as well for a couple of years at the same time.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
And all of these places, you're surrounded by plants, obviously, and you're surrounded by nature. But it's not just being in the place. Obviously, it doesn't just come by osmosis. It's hearing other people. It's hearing the gardeners at the Chelsea Physic Garden only talking about plants in Latin and botanical names, scientific names. It's that idea of plant families and the concept that an apple is related to a rose bush and a daisy is related to a sunflower, which is related to lettuce, or sort of all the kind of the thing that behind me, really.
That's related to exactly what's behind you. I was astonished by some of the relevance. I won't reference any of them at the moment. But so I suppose this book has been long in the gestation in many ways. It's been bubbling away, but fundamentally it revolves around your ability and your skill at communicating with children. I think almost certainly, and actually the illustrations and the artwork is actually stunning as well. So you've obviously worked with, is it Philip?
Philip Giordano, yes.
Yeah. And so how was he? Did you know him before? Was this an introduction forged through something else, or what's the link with him?
You know what? I've never met him. I've had one email with him after the book came out. We just sent each other after the book came out, and we were both holding a copy in our hands, and it was actually real, not just some crazy dream. He sent me an email. I sent him an email just to say, nice job.
Wow.
And that's it. No contact. So all through the editors, because obviously there were certain, as you've seen in the book, he's got a style. It's kind of, I don't quite know how to describe it, but it's quite beautiful, but obviously, and it's quite stylized. So you've got to really,
absolutely,
look like the things without losing that accuracy. And I think he's just about got that balance between artistic license and scientific reality. So I did have to there were a few things in the edit towards the end where where I sat down. I think it was a 3.5 hour meeting where I was basically going through page by page and saying, well, that's not a that's not a bromeliad, that's a heliconia, or I don't know what it was. It was just, and actually there are a few mistakes, I have to admit. We've found, in fact, in the image behind me, there's some errors, and just been in touch with the editors have been in touch with me this week because they're printing it in Spanish. And their Spanish editors have got their own scientific editor on their team, which flying I don't have. But they've picked up a few things, which is great because it means that, first of all, they've sold 10,000 copies, and secondly, they're doing a print run of 25,000, and this is a perfect opportunity to rectify any mistakes.
Amazing,
you know.
amazing. And they can incorporate the changes into the next edition, as it were. So, and I've obviously, been through it, and I understand the reference to I ate sunshine for breakfast. Do you want to obviously explain that to the viewers?
Yeah, so basically it's the very concept that everything we eat, whether it's meat or vegetable or plant, is fundamentally sunshine based, and it's really a reference to the fact that we're part of a food chain, or rather a food web, starting obviously with sunlight energy, which goes into plants and then through various consumers to us. And we are
and so the book as a whole is a sort of explanation to children about how nature exists, how plants exist, how and the contribution they make to life on Earth, essentially.
Absolutely.
And I love the start. You explain how the book has even been made, and the book is made of birch and pine. You give all the Latin names as well, and soya beans, and is it linseed and flax oil? And so it's a lovely, lovely touch, a lovely start to how it works. And there are 428,000 species of plants, of which 34,000 have recorded benefits. Does that mean the rest of them don't have any benefits, or just haven't been investigated yet?
Well, they probably have. I mean, that's a very human-centered statistic, but yeah, I mean, they've got benefits for other things, probably, for sure, as habitats and food sources for other creatures. But yeah, there's still discovery. There's still plant-based innovations, especially, I suppose, with biofuels and things like that, where fossil fuels aren't going to last forever, and fossil fuels, incidentally, are ultimately plant-based, or plant and animal-based for millions and millions of years ago. But there are, I think, the climate emergency and the fossil fuels running out probably is making governments and scientists look for more nature-based answers to things, whether it's our medicines, our materials for our cars, or our materials for our clothes, or foods and fuels, all of that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think through this very difficult time, there is an essence of how so many of us have forged a fresher relationship with nature, a relationship we perhaps didn't have before that. So in many ways, there's no better time to have published this book, where people are actually feeling that they want to educate the next generation about the benefits of nature and what have you. Clearly, that's been maybe a topic of conversation you've had with a few people. Is that right?
I mean, that's I suppose that's sort of the basis of my career, is just passing on that enthusiasm about the plant world to a new generation.
Yeah,
absolutely. Exactly. It's really fundamentally important to me.
So did you approach the publisher, or did the publisher approach you about the thought of producing this book? Was it?
I think there was some sort of holy grail of serendipity that took place for budding potential authors, because I was just going about my day job at Chelsea Physic Garden back in February 2015, taking a family group around on a family activity day during a half-term holiday, and afterwards one of the mums came over to me and just said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I said, well maybe, yeah, I think I've probably got some information up here somewhere. And she said, "Oh well, that's good because my husband runs is a co-founder of Flying Eye Books, and he would and there's absolute dearth of plant books aimed at children and families. Would you like to get in touch?" So I dropped him a line and met up with him about 5 months later because I was quite busy, and yeah, we went from there. So from February 2015 through to when it was launched in April this year, it was a long gestation just as well. Yeah,
I can't imagine that first moment when you sat down with I don't know, a pad and pen or a laptop. What do I start with? And you did indeed start with the kind of the reference to what the book's going to be made out of. I suppose is that the first thing you wrote, or did you with there other things?
It was, and actually, so when I sat down with Sam back in September 2015 near Liverpool Street Station, he told me this story about their paper, because I got quite enthusiastic about that idea of just, you're holding a book, it's made of plants. And he told me the story of where they get their paper from. It's an Arctic paper. Anyway, I think it's in this story didn't end up, I don't think, in this edit of the book, but it's I think it was in, I think Poland, and they've got the pines growing, the birch is growing there, and the eucalyptus or whatever it is, the other tree was brought over from Spain, and they've got this whole circular system where they use the water from the lake. And he told me this whole story, and I just thought that was really, really good to kind of show the backstory of the very book you're holding in itself, really. Yeah, the inks. And I said, it would be very important to me that this is printed with vegetable inks as well, because a lot of ink is synthetic and it's not plant-based, but to me it was crucial that the book was printed with vegetable-based inks as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good. Well, that's wonderful. And throughout the book, you have a series of DIY projects, which I think are amazing. I don't know. Let me pick one at random, and perhaps you can explain the process. Let me find one. Here we are. So this one is called cornflower slime.
Oh yes.
So what's involved in cornflower slime? Okay,
well, cornflower slime, you can do it with custard powder as well. I mean, this is out of the 12 DIY activities in there, that's my 8-year-old daughter's favorite one. It's fairly messy. It's basically you just mix corn flour with a small amount of water until it forms until you can stir it. It's not so runny that it will just flow away, but it's a really strange thing. It's a non-shearing liquid, is the scientific terminology. I think it's the equivalent of if you filled it's like quicksand, basically. So if you filled a swimming pool with corn flour and just the right amount of water, you could run across it, but if you stood still, you'd sink into it.
Right.
It's the same thing. So when it's quite gloopy and you can hold it, you can just about sort of play with it, and it's actually, when you hit it, it will smash. But if you just held it in your hand, it would just trickle through your fingers. So it's a really weird thing. And you can add food coloring to it. And I mean, in the book, it says add some beetroot powder or turmeric. Obviously, that would just make your fingers go yellow, like you've been smoking 50 a day. But yeah, it's pretty weird.
Absolutely. And this it really is. It's an encyclopedia for children of nature. Really, so it's such a nice book. I paused here briefly because I just saw some relevant living fossils, which seems like a really nice, an incredible topic. So how some plants, obviously we've had loads of plants over millions of years, but some haven't changed or developed that much. So, for instance, and this is relevant because I've got one in the garden, the ginkgo tree.
Oh yeah.
Which in fact, my wife has just repotted it actually, which I would extraordinary to find that in our garden. That's a dinosaur.
Amazing tree, absolutely amazing. It's a Chinese tree, and it's in a sort of, if we were looking at it on the plant kingdom evolutionary chart, it's at its own evolutionary dead end. It doesn't have any siblings in the botanical sense or scientific sense, but it survived. You know, it would have been grazed upon by dinosaurs, would have eaten the leaves of it, the herbivorous ones or omnivorous ones. And it's a beautiful tree, as you know, and you know, in the autumn you get these lovely yellow leaves, and they're beautiful, really nice. But it's and it's just, I think if you go to New York City, Manhattan's basically filled with ginkgo trees as street trees because they're pollution tolerant. I mean, if they can withstand cataclysmic whatever happened with the dinosaurs, you know, it's pretty tough.
You refer to that as the Great Dying. That's not a phrase I'd heard before, but the Great Dying 252 million years ago, of which obviously certain plants did survive, including our friendly ginkgo here. And that's extraordinary. And and you explaining how plants have adapted over time to kind of work with their environments, which all manner of changes can take place, is extraordinary. I was particularly enchanted by the fact that the sunflower is able to help with pollution, which that's something everyone needs to know about. We're going to have farms of sunflowers as a result of your book, maybe.
there was during at Chelsea Physic Garden, the previous head gardener, Nick Bailey, who's now one of the Gardeners World presenters, he put on he put in some really good plant beds in 2012, him and the team, which were on plants that are useful in our lives. And one of the beds was land restoration. So it's plants that sort of hold the soil together. They've got extensive root systems that hold the soil together to stop erosion. Plants that basically, sort of bioremediation, which is sucking out pollution out of the ground and faster than any other known method. And that included sunflowers, which have been used after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster and after the Japanese Fukushima disaster in 2011, I think. And
sucking radiation out of the ground.
Yeah, and then you treat your sunflowers as radioactive waste. So you have to then you can't eat them. Then it'd give you a nice glow, that would. But you can, you know, then they've extracted it because they've got this extensive root system that can do just that. It's pretty amazing. But then from a sort of symbolic and sort of I suppose mental health point of view, all these 10,000 packets of seeds that were sent out to these Japanese communities to plant on bits of polluted land. Imagine when they're all flowering, you got this beautiful sea of yellow, and it's sort of acts as a beacon of hope as well. So it's sort of a double action.
Lovely. So the book takes us in all different directions, and I put a note here on food chains. I found obviously how fragile kind of life is to a degree. It relies on certain food chains, and how and so that's particularly nicely sort of visualized here with how that works. Did you have an idea of how this page would look, given the importance of it? But very nicely done.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because it was a real surprise when I saw the final version of that page, because I've never, in all my studying of ecology, I don't think I've ever seen a food chain or food web illustrated in that way. It's quite beautifully done.
Yeah.
If I had it to hand, I would love. I don't have it with me right now, but I like drawing. I'm quite artistic and probably much better photographer than I am a painter or artist in that way. But my original sketch that I included for the book is sort of tragic.
Oh, was it?
I mean, it was supposed to be a fox, a rabbit, and a blade of lettuce or something, and my fox just looked, I don't know, didn't even look like a mammal. So yeah, I mean, he's done a billion times better job. I mean, it's so sketchy.
Were there whole parts of it that you'd sketched out in your own kind of rudimentary form?
Yeah, I mean, I did a mixture in my notebook that I've got here. I did a lot of the preliminary sketches of the sections that I thought should be. I mean, I've got this I've got this page here. I don't know if that's visible, but you've got all this side is basically a whole load of different topics that I think should be. That's Newton having an apple falling on it. I mean, that's how good my drawing is. Isaac, you know.
I didn't see Isaac Newton in here actually, but he must have missed that.
But no, he's not. You see, there's so much. I mean, they said just write. Don't worry about the word count. We'll just go from there. And I wrote 41,000 words, which was quite a lot. And I think about 20,000 were used. So
okay,
there's a lot on the cutting room floor. But I did, as well as my terrible sketches and my scribbles, I did write the most of it just on my commute to work, sitting on a small iPad, just sitting, typing away on my Victoria Line journey. I live far enough out of London or in the suburbs to get a seat on the tube, which is a sort of gold dust, really. So I get on the beginning of the line and spend half an hour at least each way. So I just use my commute to write it. Yeah.
The number of authors I've spoken to, who have they use their commute, as a working person to write the dream, to create that dream. So, and still are, frankly, So, good. Well, I put a little post-it in this one. Toothbrushes. I was astonished to read. The average person will use 300 toothbrushes. Frankly, we should all be using biodegradable ones. What do you recommend in your toothbrush?
My toothbrush regime. I mean, I've just got an electric toothbrush, so that's what I've got. But I've used other things. I mean, all around the world, people use lots of different things, from twigs from olive trees through to there are certain twigs that have got, antibacterial properties, and even things like licorice root you could use if you wanted to. Anything that you can chew on and kind of chew away at, and it will actually produce a sort of a brush-like thing. They can all work, basically. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm conscious that time is ticking. Now I know we did talk about, because I saw a bit about a project you did called Shelf Life.
Yes.
And I just thought, as a kind of a marketing campaign, I just thought it was a really clever thing. Now, I know that you've got an image that you can possibly share.
Yes.
And perhaps whilst you're showing that image, you can explain the idea behind Shelf Life, which is obviously a page in the book on the subject. But
yeah, so here we are. This is a small fraction, really, but just a kind of hopefully a useful enough image to demonstrate the concept. Back in 2003, whilst working at Chelsea Physic Garden, I was surrounded by, there's another really amazing book called Plants for People by Annie Lewington, and it just really switched me on to the subject of ethnobotany, also known as cultural botany or economic botany, where foods and, well, everything from the desk I'm sitting at through to the clothes I'm wearing, the oxygen I'm breathing, and the breakfast in my tummy, are all based on plants. And sport and cricket. I mean, this is the essence of my book. I mean, I've thanked Anna Lewington in the dedication part of my book in the inside front cover because of her incredible influence on me, I think. But so throughout all of this, I was just thinking, it's kind of, plants are useful. How am I going to get this across? And whilst working at Chelsea Physic Garden, one day we got 5,000 different species of plants from all around the world. Exotic things, cacti, things from the jungle, carnivorous plants that can eat flies and all that stuff. And yet this little schoolboy from I don't know where, some sort of inner city primary school, saw onions growing and just noticed that the plant leaves coming out the top, and he could just see the beginnings of the onion as it goes underground on the soil surface. And he sort of jumped up and down with delight and just shouted, "Onions, onions, onions," in like the penny had dropped that onions come from a plant, and there it is. And I thought, that's almost so basic, so down to earth, literally. And that sort of penny drop for me is that, well, I must have a way of showing this. And it just came to me one day to get actually I saw in one of the shops and near the Physic Garden antique shop, I saw some Hovis bread tins for sale. And I thought, Hovis bread tin, I could buy one of those. What would I grow in it? And I was thinking, oh yeah, wheat. And from that moment, I started torturing plants and putting them in totally unsuitable containers. But however horticulturally cruel it is, it's educational gold dust, because you've got these shreddies growing, wheat growing out of shreddies. You've got mint growing out of a mouthwash. You've got sunflower in a sunflower oil, and sugar beet in the sugar, calendula in the hand cream, or whatever that is, something. And then guava, back to the pip book, trying to get quite exotic things going from pips, guava in the guava juice, and so much more. And it really sort of caught on. I think the Physic Garden is probably still doing that, and it just became a really, really good teaching tool, because you can stand in front of a group of people, whatever age, and say, especially children, you can say, has anyone had any plants for breakfast? And they laugh at you, and then you just bring out a thing of cereal or orange juice with a orange plant growing out of it, or for lunch you got a packet of crisps. I mean, a packet of ready salted crisps with a potato growing, and it's just a classic.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So that went from there, and then in 2004 we had a really decent display of these plants at the Chelsea Flower Show, and Waitrose got on board and lent us all the shelves and made it look like a corner of a supermarket, and that went down really, really well. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one part of my legacy.
I saw you won a Silver Gilt Award. Frankly, I think you were robbed. It deserves gold any day. Any day. Well, but no, absolutely stunning. I come from an advertising background, and it just ticked all my boxes, that campaign. But no, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Very welcome.
Right, let's plough through. I've put a few post-it notes in of thoughts that just made me smile, and I like them. The potato power plant. I know I've heard about that. I think they did a thing on Big Bang Theory about that, which that I was rubbish at science. Okay, so bear with me. But the fact that you can power a light or some sort of thing from a potato, and that's one of the DIY projects, by the way. So you could do that rather beautifully.
I think I've read recently on that subject of using vegetables as batteries. I mean, the famous one that I remember as a child, the sort of thing you might see at the Science Museum shop, is using lemons to power a light bulb or a clock. But the thing about lemons, fruit basically attracts fruit flies, and it rots more quickly than a potato. So I think potato is quite a good choice. And I read something that in parts of Israel, they're experimenting with kind of wiring lots of potatoes up and producing light so you can be off grid. So rural communities that are off grid could actually do it, create this whole network of potatoes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever smelt a potato when it goes off. You don't want to be in the room with one of those, because that's pretty disgusting smell. But the fact that it's being, it could potentially light our homes is hilarious.
No, it is hilarious. You can't eat the potatoes after, can you? Would that be a really way?
Oh, the other thing the article said is if you cook the potato for 8 minutes, that it produces, it's better because the cell walls are broken down partially, and therefore the electricity can flow more freely. So it's parboiled. But yeah, you probably can eat if you're desperate.
Lovely. I just saw this one now. Local living landmarks. That seems like a really nice little DIY project. What's involved in that?
Well, that was one that they towards the end of the editing process, they actually unfortunately cut out a few bits and bobs, but they needed a sort of an extra activity to link to the section of the book which that is in, about environmental stewardship and looking after our planet. And I just thought that might be quite a nice thing to do, and it entails basically just printing out a map of your local area and put your house in the center of it, your home in the center of it, and sort of have a 1 mile radius or one or 2 kilometer radius around you, and then just print that out and take it out and walk the streets around you and make notes on the different plants you see. And if you don't know them, then find them out, because there's loads of ways of finding out. If you do know them, make a note of it. And it's sort of, if your friends who live 2 kilometers away do the same, you've got this kind of network of plant identification in your local area. And it's just that sort of, it's what we see all the time. And we're very lucky. I mean, London's such a green city that last year was designated the world's first national park city. So it's over half of it is green, as it were. So we're really lucky. Obviously, where you and your bookshop is it's a beautiful green part of the world as well. So we are blessed with trees and other plants. Even just people's front gardens. So that was the idea of that, was just to kind of get to know what's around you and appreciate and be able to identify, sort of mixture of exercise and science, I suppose. Yeah.
Good. Listen, let's finish with one last thing, and that's the plant awards. You should always end with an award ceremony. So at the back, you designate the award-winning plants. Have you got a favourite out of this lot?
What have we got there? We got the biggest. We've got the slowest growing. The
oldest living plant is that's a good one. The Bristol cone pine tree. That's in the mountains of California. 5,000 years old. That deserves. I would like to have a look at that. That's amazing.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, hilariously, some scientists from probably one of the Californian university wanted to find out just how old those Bristol cone pines were. So they cut one down and counted the rings, and obviously that's killed that one. But seemed a bit of a funny way around to cut it down. Oh yeah, it's 6,000 years old. Oh,
yeah.
But, the lichens are on that one as well, aren't they? There's probably mention of the deepest roots. I mean, there's some extraordinary plants that have got roots that, you're in a mine somewhere in, I think it's South Africa, roots that the miners are looking up, and what's that hanging down from the roof of the cave, it's a root and they're like 50 meters underground,
Wow.
That sort of thing. Plants are pretty good. They're pretty resilient.
Actually, the fastest growing plant, that brings us back to our toothbrush conversation.
I mean, that's one thing that I really loved working at Kew Gardens, is not only just the novelty of being able to teach in that beautiful palm house, but one thing they've got in that palm house is the giant bamboo. And they've got a little, like we've got with our daughter, measuring how tall she gets per month or every few months. And they've got the same with the giant bamboo there. And it's, it's probably, I think it's in its happiest place. Kew Gardens isn't its happiest place, but it grew pretty fast. You can see like in a day it was an inch or so. But in its happiest situation, giant bamboo can grow 1 meter a day.
That's extraordinary.
You could watch that grow. You could literally sit there. I think there's stories, I don't know how true they are, of workers in the fields. They take their hat off because they're a bit hot, and they put it down and they can't reach it because the bamboo
can't reach it at the end. Very funny. No, I'm brilliant. Look, congratulations on this book. It is extraordinary. Obviously, there's a big glossary at the back of terms, bits and pieces. For me, every child should have one of these. It's an extraordinary piece of literature, extraordinary book, and well done. I'm sure you must be very proud of it.
Very, very proud. Yeah, I mean, the timing, obviously lots of things have been massively affected by the recent events and so forth with COVID-19, but the fact that the book launch was scheduled for the 26th of March was pretty bad timing. And by now I was on some huge tour of bookshops around Britain, which hasn't happened, but we're doing this. So this is actually one of my first bookshop events right now. So it's really nice to be able to do that. And I mean, I'm very, very proud of it. And I still can't quite believe that it's real, really.
No, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't aware of it until a customer of mine, Ronnie. I don't know if you know Ronnie.
She's one of my friend's mums from school.
Right. Well, she's been a bit of an advocate of this. She's been buying them like going out of fashion, frankly, and obviously giving them as gifts or something. So bless her. Ronnie's I mean,
Oh, she's cool. She's really cool. No,
throughout
she's
lockdown, we've been doing delivering books, and I've been delivering these books to Ronnie's house for and they're not small books either. So it's my panniers have been weighed down.
it's nice and sturdy. I mean, it's good. I love the fact that it's it's pretty chunky and it's it's 140 pages or something, and it's 125 pages.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that it's hardback as well.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, really good.
Thank you so much for joining us, and look
me.
after yourself. And let's have you over for a physical event at some point when we're allowed.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
A huge thanks to Michael for that wonderful interview. I Ate Sunshine for Breakfast is available in our bookshop. Give us a call, 01442 827 653. All the other purchase blurb is available in the text below this video. Thank you so much for watching. I've got so many more interviews to follow, and see you next time.